And while the world is on fire tonight, the nation's attention is focused on the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The 31-year-old was shot and killed in an outdoor event today at Utah Valley State University. This was an event for Turning Point USA. That's the political group that Kirk helped to find back in 2012. And at this time, authorities believe the shot was fired from a building about 200 yards away. There was a lot of confusion today in the hours since the shooting, whether or not a suspect was in custody. There was a man detained moments after the shooting. He was released. Then FBI Director Kash Patel announced a separate suspect was in custody. The FBI now confirming that person of interest was released after an interrogation. Kirk was taking questions from an audience member about mass shootings and gun violence when he was struck.
So I turned around, and like 10 to 20 seconds later, after I got done talking to Charlie, I saw that he was shot in the neck and that he was squirting blood everywhere.
If anyone in the sound of my voice celebrated even a little bit at the news of this shooting, I would beg you to look in the mirror. I don't care what his politics are. I care that he was an American.
By the way, leaders like Spencer Cox have been at the forefront of bipartisanship. He's been doing events with Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Of course, Moore's a Democrat. Cox is a Republican. On Capitol Hill, many members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, condemned the killing of Kirk today. We know that, but before that, the president ordered flags to be flown at half-staff in response to the shooting, and he also released a message about him from the Oval Office.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
I don't know what more you say about that, because the president is right. We demonize those we disagree with, and then anyway, House Speaker Mike Johnson led the House in prayer and a moment of silence on the Hill.
The chair would ask that all members present in the chamber and those in the gallery please rise for a moment of prayer for Charlie Kirk and his family. Let's wait a minute. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Shh. The House will be in order.
And if you're wondering why a moment of silent prayer erupted into whatever that was, you can blame Lauren Boebert for that. She said, quote, silent prayers get silent results. But to be fair, this is a touchy topic. Political violence has been growing. It's been exploding in recent years. Hell, 3 months ago, Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband and their dog were killed in their home. And then there was the attempt on then-candidate Trump at the rally in Butler last year, then that other attempted assassination against him, then the attack of former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and so many more. And while the president's blaming the radical left for it, some Democrats like Illinois Governor Jay Pritzker, they're pointing the finger the other direction.
But I will say that political violence, unfortunately, has been ratcheting up in this country. We saw the shootings, the killings in Minnesota. We've seen other political violence occur in other states. And I would just say it's got to stop. And I think there are people who are fomenting it in this country. I think the president's rhetoric often foments it. We've seen the January 6th rioters who clearly, have tripped a new era of political violence.
I'm joined now by former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh of Illinois, who's up late with us here tonight on the Final Five. First of all, I appreciate you joining us. And the reason I reached out to you was because as this news broke today, you had some pretty personal thoughts about Charlie Kirk, and I thought maybe our audience would like to hear them.
Good to be with you, my friend. Look, Charlie Kirk was a son to me. Now, that's a weird thing for me to say now, because Charlie Kirk and I have been on different sides of the political debate for 6 or 7 years. But I met him when he was 16 years old, and he was from my congressional district. I was his political mentor. I helped him launch TPUSA. He and I were tied at the hip for 5, 6, 7 years. And then Trump came along. We went our separate ways, and we would go after each other on social media. But that was it. And even when we did that, he still always was a son to me, even though I disagreed with so much of what he did and said.
As I know you've learned during your time in the Congress and since leaving, things are said sometimes in the context of politics. Sometimes it can get personal. But I've heard so many positive things from people in the media, people on the left. And I think in times like this, I hate that this is when we agree with each other that somebody was a good person and somebody was a good family man, that it takes this to get to that point.
Look, again, I knew him personally, and I loved him personally. We didn't interact so much after he and I went our separate ways. He was a divisive political figure, purposely. I can say that as someone who used to be a divisive political figure. And we're in this age now in America. He had every right to be a divisive figure, but man, we're on this road of political hate in this country, and it's leading to more and more political violence, both sides, and we got to stop it.
We were going through the list here in the newsroom, and I think about Gabby Giffords. I think about Steve Scalise, Governor Shapiro, Melissa Hortman in Minnesota right now. So, I mean, what's the remedy here? At what point do we? Because here's the thing. As you and I are recording this, we don't know anything about the person who pulled that trigger. We don't know whether they're left, right, anything. And we may know that by the time this airs tonight. How do we get past this jumping to conclusions, assuming that we know that everybody's ideology, what they ascribe to, what motivated them? How do we get past that?
Look, it's up to us as the American people. This is the most divided this country's been since just before the Civil War. But my friend, you know, politicians are incentivized to divide us. Media voices are incentivized to divide us. Social media divides us. Until our damn political leaders and media voices rise above what they're doing, I don't see this thing changing. And I see it getting worse. And I'm looking at the reaction of a lot of folks on the right now. And man, they're squarely just pointing a finger at the left. The left has a political violence problem. Bull crap. This is a both sides problem. But if we're not grown up enough to admit it's both sides, then we'll never fix it.
So as we move ahead here, I mean, who is there anybody out there that can? Is there one person right now that can get up and start guiding us down the right road, or is it going to take a collective effort here?
I think it's going to take a collective effort from leading voices having the courage to stand against their side and come together. Look, forget about Donald Trump. He is who he is. You won't get anything from him. But I'm hoping that a few Republican members of Congress and maybe a few Democratic members of Congress look at each of their sides, come together and tell each side to stand down. Unless they're willing, our leaders are willing to stand in a room together, the American people won't.
A couple of weeks ago, after the attempted arson or the arson that happened at the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro made the rounds on interviews, and I think as somebody like him who got up and really didn't talk about the ideology of the person who apparently was a very disturbed individual. But as we know, in many of these cases, they are, doesn't matter, left, right, whatever, they are disturbed individuals. And it takes that sort of defect to do this kind of violence.
And look, we don't know who the killer was, but I'll tell you what, we do know this was a political assassination.
Yeah.
It's clear that it was a sniper shot from a couple hundred yards away on a roof. So this guy knew what he was doing. He fired a single shot at Charlie Kirk, not trying to kill anybody else. So this was, in fact, a political assassination. And again, Charlie was like a son to me. I disagreed with everything he said, but he was the leader of a movement.
Yeah.
So this is the assassination of a movement leader in America. That's really damn scary.
I know you've been making the rounds all night and talking about this and talking about so much more, so I'll leave it at that. Congressman Walsh, great to see you again. We appreciate it.
Always good to see you, my friend.